coming up on Small Town Charm, it's going to be a discussion about the last BOC meeting. What do these density numbers really mean? Do they matter? They don't. Spoiler alert. And are we wasting our time? What does compromise look like? And what is the real motivation behind certain BOC members potentially changing their mind about these density numbers all of a sudden? All that and more coming up on Small Town Charm. Welcome into Small Town Charm. It's been a while for all of us, but we're glad you're here. I'm glad these guys are here too. We got Chris, we got Mike, my name's Daniel. Welcome back once again. It's been probably 6 weeks or so, it feels like. Maybe not that long.
We did it like early December, right?
Okay, yeah, it was after Thanksgiving, I know that. But thank you for being patient with us while we all took a little break. Definitely was, not gonna lie, a little hard to get motivated to like do it again. It's a lot of work to get everything put
for
together.
Sure.
And I definitely feel like as we're recording this, there was a BOC meeting, the January BOC meeting happened, and I, in all honesty, have not had a chance to watch any of it. Wasn't there and didn't watch any of it. I know, Mike, you were there, right?
I was there.
Yeah. So
I haven't watched it either. So
yeah. So we're
Nice.
can we even be on this podcast
I know,
anymore?
right?
Like,
at least we admit that we don't pay attention when we don't pay attention.
It was the holidays. I was kind of in the same boat as you. It was like the holidays ended. It's hard to get motivated. The only reason I texted you guys, we got to record, because I went to the BOC meeting, got fired up. I'm like, all right, we're right back in this.
yeah.
I definitely need a little bit of that anger to drive me, to motivate me. And I've been tuned out long enough where I'm like, maybe we don't, I don't know.
Right.
But no, I'm sure we'll get right back into it. It'd be
Yeah.
fine. So Merry Christmas, guys. Happy New Year. I don't know if do you celebrate some kind of weird like Polish version of Christmas? Like where they like,
No.
you don't get like,
My birthday was on Friday.
oh, happy birthday. So like, I knew that actually. I don't know if like maybe like, you guys celebrate by like, to like.
Christmas Eve is the bigger deal. So like,
Really?
and, yeah. So like, I grew up Polish Catholic, no longer Polish Catholic, but Christmas Eve is the big one.
Really?
Because it's Lent. You have like traditions,
okay.
12 different side dishes. And
I didn't know if like maybe like there's like a thing where they, you leave out like a worker's boot at night and they leave, the government.
Santa Claus Day is December 6th. So so
Really?
in Poland, Christmas, you don't get presents from Santa. You just get presents for Christmas for Jesus' birthday. But you do have Santa, which is Saint Nick.
St. Nicholas Day. Yeah.
So December
Interesting.
6th.
I actually grew up celebrating that. It was like a completely different day, and
Really?
like,
Did they
That's
put it
cool.
under your pillow?
yeah,
Or
and
night?
you'd put your shoes out,
Yeah.
and you'd get like candy and stuff in your shoes,
That
and I
sucks. What
always
happens
get
if
like
I go to
a.
feet?
I don't know if Chris had that problem. You probably have pretty
No.
big feet, I'm guessing, being told.
But it was a little confusing. Like there was Saint Nick, and then there was Santa Claus,
Separate.
and they were different people.
Good.
It's confusing. Well, anyway, happy all those holidays to you
Yeah.
and to everybody out there watching or listening. So let's talk about the meeting that only 1/3 of us went to. I know that probably the thing that we all care about on this show the most is zoning.
Right.
But Mike, tell us what mattered the most to you, other than you being appointed to the BCA.
With the skin on my teeth again.
Yeah.
So the meeting, obviously the primary focus is the zoning. There wasn't much on there. So it was the second meeting after the new BOC with Kate and Jessica being on the board, Haley being mayor. The second time around, they kind of they have like a rhythm now. So it was a very well run meeting where there was a lot of progression forward with the zoning. They didn't get through it all, so they scheduled a special meeting, which is tomorrow, Monday, January 9th. So then they've gotten through all the zoning changes that were like minimal, or not minimal, but they weren't density yet. They got into the density part. They started talking about CD5. CD5 was proposed 24 acres a unit, or 24 units an acre. They got that down to 18. Tried to get CD4 from 12 to 8. That didn't pass. Down to 10, that didn't pass. So it's staying at 12 for now. So it's very clear that Derek and Joel want the village to be as lenient on density as possible to encourage all the growth and all the investment in the area. And it's very clear that Jessica and Kate don't. They want they're so they both voted down changing the densities for CD5 and CD4, even though they were going down. They both voted no to new densities because they weren't half.
They were low enough.
They weren't low enough, right? So the way that CD5 became 18 units instead of 24 was actually a two-step process. And Haley, so Derek proposed 20 units because he knew that 24 was making everybody uncomfortable. So he proposed 20. Joe voted for it, and then Haley just came on and said, "I'm not happy with 20. 20 is not what I want, but it's lower than 24, so I'm gonna vote this through." That's smart. Yeah. But then Jessica and Kate didn't, so they just voted that down because they wanted 12.
Could they I don't understand the process or understand what's likely to happen. Let's say that Jessica and Kate were like, okay, they did the same thing Haley did, but like if they were to say, this is not as low as I want, but this is lower, so let's do that. Could they propose to get it even lower? Like, could they just keep working through it? Or would they do that though, or would that be perceived as like inefficient? Like, why don't you just propose what you want?
Inefficiency is.
Does that matter?
That's yeah.
So that doesn't exist in the vocabulary.
No, that's the
BOC
that's
members.
the one constant throughout the BOC. Throughout the BOC.
Doesn't matter who's up there; it's always inefficient.
Right, but would they do that, or is the idea that they think that they just are going to get one vote on this and they better get exactly what they want?
You mean like the overall thing, or just specific items?
Specific items.
No, so with that CD5 density downgrade, what happened? They voted 20, and then the very next item, Haley came back and said, 20 is too high for me. I want 18, and then they voted 18, and then Jessica and Kate voted no. But then
But it was 3-2 at that point.
Right, and if Derek or Joel would have voted no to 18, it would have stayed at 20. I don't know, like if they want more density, one of them should have just voted no, and then they would have kept the 20. Right. But I do appreciate the fact that Haley does seem to want to work together, like at a level that we haven't seen her do while she was commissioner. She genuinely wants this to get done. You can tell, and you can tell that she's okay not winning every little battle, which is much different from what it was before. And then she with the CD4, which is the step lower, which is like it's less downtown, more mixed use type of zoning. The density that TPDC set was 12. Kate and Jessica wanted 6. Haley proposed 8. I don't think even got a second. And then Haley even said, like, you guys, like, this, we're going to vote this down? Like, we're going down to 8. Like, you can still try for 6, but at least like baby step this down to 6. And then she tried again for 10. That didn't. I don't think that got a second either. And then just kind of died. Like, you can tell she was visibly shocked. They're like, I'm trying to, like, at least give you some type of,
concession.
Or at least a small victory on the way to the number that you ultimately want, because 6 is not off the table. If we vote 8, 6 is not off the table, but it's still less than 12.
Right. But it seems like Kate and Jessica. Keep in mind, haven't watched it, so I didn't really get to read their body language or hear what they said in the debate. But it seems like they are just sticking their foot in the sand or drawing a line in the sand and just
I think it's worse.
Saying, hey, like it's our way or we're not voting yes.
I think it's worse than that. I think it's they come up there with notes and like their notepad would say CD for 6 units per acre, and anything different than that number, it's an automatic no. So I'm the only person, I've done a little bit of research on this. I'm the only person in town in the history of Nolensville that has ever served on a board or a commission with a no vote from anyone. So it's usually like somebody will propose an appointment for any board, CIP, BZA.
Is this like a real? This is a real stat.
This is a real stat.
Or this is like self-proclaimed.
It's self-proclaimed, but I've done enough research to feel confident about it.
You did more research on that than most people who are NIMBYs have done research on.
It's funny to me because I've been watching this. I've been watching this for 4 years now, and it's a very watered down process where somebody will say a name as an appointment, and the whole board realizes this is a volunteer position. It's a recommendation body at best. At at worst, it's like they don't even meet ever. I've been on the BZA for 6 months. I haven't been to a single meeting, not because I didn't attend. It's just there was no need for a meeting. We didn't have a meeting for 6 months. But yeah, so somebody will drop a name, and everybody, even if you don't like that person, you just kind of go with the flow. It's whatever. So 1 out of 5, 1 out of 9, doesn't matter. I'm the only person that's served the last BZA with a 3-2 vote, and now I got on to the BZA again with a 3-2 vote. And that's to reference Kate and Jessica. They both voted no to me. And it's because their notepad said, screw Mike Lushek. That name pops up. You never vote for that. Yeah. And it's almost like they're using that vote to energize their base.
Sure.
Tommy Duggar, the big supporter, probably doesn't like me very much.
Yeah.
And then they get to go home and text him, I voted no to Mike Lushek. How cool am I? It's well, I still got on. So.
I mean, I definitely think that is just, there is a personal vendetta there. And whether it's from the election and seeing your name on comment threads. I know. I mean, who knows? It could be a lot of things that are tied up in there. But yeah, I mean, for something as silly though as whether or not you get on this I mean, no offense, Mike, but kind of a BS board. It's it's not like you were. Well, it's not like you threw. It's not like you threw your name in for the PC.
Right.
Right. The next level board.
Right.
Below the BOC. Yeah. I don't know. It just kind of seems like now we're just being petty, right?
Right, and then the insane part of it, the only reason I ever applied to the BZA was because they granted a variance to a pawn shop across the street from Town Hall.
Right.
And I got kind of upset about that. I was like, what's the point of having these 8-hour-long PC meetings about the Kelvin temperature of light bulbs? And then you're approving a business that is proven to be an undesirable business model in a public setting like that, right across the street from the police station or the core of your town, and then they ended up having a vacancy, and the big thing on the boards on all these committees in town is that they're having a hard time getting quorum because they are volunteer positions that they don't usually meet regularly. So they'll have 5 people. They'll send out an email blast saying, "Hey, we need to have this meeting because there's an agenda item." Well, 2 or 3 of those people are like, "Well, I'm traveling for work," or "I can't do it," or they just don't check their town email because there's never anything on there, and then they can't get a quorum. So me initially, applying for this was I got time, I pay attention, I can show up to a meeting here and there.
Sure.
It's not that big of a deal, and then to kind of every single time my name comes up to have this awkward nay vote.
I kind of think I don't know, you've inspired me a little bit, and I kind of feel the next committee seat that opens up, Daniel and I should throw our names in the ring.
The board of construction.
I mean, how cool would it be if the entire Small Town Charm lineup also put their money where their mouth is, and it's not only do we make a podcast because we care so much, but we also actually serve.
Yeah, we also actually don't show up for meetings.
I would love to be on the town events committee and actually make a cool fireworks show for once. Not throwing shade at all, but
not on the parking lot. Not on a blacked out parking lot in the middle of July.
No,
I like that only because I can walk there. But
that beef is just coming because I lived in a neighborhood that threw a better fireworks show for a while.
Shoes,
yeah.
But so tell me a little bit about, and I don't want to go into this again. We've been on this a lot, but the whole density number discussion.
Yeah. 12
or 6 or 8 or 20 or whatever it is. Does anyone know why Kate and Jessica are hung up on 6, other than or whoever, if they're just being, someone else told them that's what they need to think. Whoever's coming up with the 6 number, is there a reason for it?
You can give me probably the more realistic and logical answer for it. What I actually think is going on, and I think I said this in another episode, I think that because we've heard TPUDC, the folks that have created this whole planning document and are experts in zoning and everything. And they've stood up in front of the board numerous times. They've stood in front of the planning commission and said the number is arbitrary. Like, it doesn't, you guys are so hung up on the number and we don't understand why. If you look at how this zoning code works, it eliminates certain types of densities from ever being possible. So like, in theory, if you say that CD5 has 24 units per acre, fine. Like, that is the number that's in the document. But like, in reality, when you start getting into how many units can actually be built on a piece of property because of all of the elements of zoning that come together,
right,
you can't actually build 24 units an acre unless you're like working within a vacuum where everything just works out perfectly on a parcel of land, which is probably never going to happen in Nolensville, just given how everything's
like
laid
you were
out.
to find like a perfectly level, clear piece of land that magically already had buffers built in, and roads already built.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know like how you.
Like if you look at like the, and I know this just from having conversations with Derek and some other people that are involved. Like, if you look at like all the parcels that are kind of being piled together as like the theoretical village, which is like everything between what roads, Mike? Burke Hollow and Nolensville Road and Rocky Fork, like that corner where the fire department is, all the way to Burke Hollow. Everything in there is kind of like thought of as the village. So if you look at all that land and then start taking into account buffers and like how the parcels are all designed, the hill and the slope, and like what you can do on that land, you can't actually get 24 units per acre, except for maybe like a little section of it that like would be possible.
You might get like one building or something.
Yeah. And so I think that really what they are arguing over is somehow, or at some point in time, they did enough research. I'll give them that. Like I think they have at least researched this enough to know what fighting over density will provide them, which is that you can't get apartments. So like, I think that they know that if there's like a high density number, it's going to allow some amount of apartments. Whether it's like, I mean, I've been going to Mount Juliet lately, and there's some apartments that I visit there, and it's like, these are not the typical apartment building where it's like a 3 or 4 story building with like multiple units and it's all in a row and there's probably like 100 units per building. It's like, they look like townhomes, but there's 4 units in every single
They have a gym
building
downstairs. There's like outdoor.
Correct. They're all connected. It's a long unit, but like, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's like LC.
Yeah, my office is in Mount Juliet.
Yeah.
It's one of the fastest growing little.
Yeah, and I mean this complex is great. It's got some like restaurants and like it doesn't look like an apartment complex, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's not townhomes, and so I think what they're realizing is that like no matter if we go above a certain number, whether it's 8 or 6, like you're gonna get some variation of apartments because developers know how to build within those parameters, and so that's my opinion of like why they're fighting so hard for this. They don't want to say, well, we don't want apartments, because then they become the bad guys who are like, against things that help teachers or lower income people. Like they're taking a very political route, which is just like, no, this is a zoning issue. Mm-hmm. We just don't want a certain density. And it's like, but you have ulterior motives for not wanting that density.
The problem you run into if you make that argument is what you just said, which is that you don't want to use the one maybe piece of factual information you have to support your argument, which is the apartment thing.
Yep.
So then you can't make a cohesive argument and you end up sounding like the way these people sound, which is, I feel like this is this, or I think this, or I feel, it's always I feel, or I would be more comfortable with.
Yeah.
I just wish, I honestly would have a lot more respect for them, for anybody on that side of the aisle, so to speak, if they would just come out and say, I don't want apartments. Like, I will vote for anything that would give us apartments. I will vote against anything that will give us apartments.
But the thing about that too is that we do have provisions in this new zoning that limit apartments to a percentage. So I think currently you can't have more than 50% of the units be apartments. It has to be owner occupied. You said that I probably have a logical answer to that. I don't. There's no logic behind it.
Yeah.
So the zoning numbers or the density numbers in our zoning right now, they're not maximums. They're not limits. They're an example of how much density we should expect with the design standards that are set within the district. So that's the big thing that they don't want to talk about. They, meaning the people that don't want all that density, is that when CD5 says you can have 24 units an acre, that's not an allowance. That's TPUDC saying typically with these type of design standards, there might be a way where a developer can maximize it to 24 acres or 24 units. We don't see it going higher. It's a range of like what to expect. It's not like that. They came out and said that the only reason why they put density in there is because they knew that Nolensville is so hell-bound on density limits that they wouldn't be comfortable, or they wouldn't be, they said comfortable. I don't think Nolensville, the BOC, is capable of thinking how a parcels develop and what they could get without looking at a density number. Because normally form-based zoning, which we're going to form-based zoning, meaning that our zoning code tells you what buildings have to look like and where they have to be located on the parcel, meaning like you have a road and that building has to be brought up to the road, and there's a sidewalk, and your garage can be in this layer of the of the building. It can be here. So that's form. Like you basically create these little envelopes of like, this is where your house goes, this is where your garage goes, this is what you need between the road and the building. And so that's the new way to zone. That's the appropriate way to zone, because we have land use zoning now. Currently our current or old zoning is land use, and that basically says residential. Like
here are the acceptable uses.
Yeah, and then we have design standards of saying like it has to be a brick facade, it has to be a garage facing sideways, like a side-loaded garage. It has to have a pitched roof. Like we have those standards, but but a land use or a use zoning just tells you what the end use of the product has to be, whereas form-based focuses more on like, this is what we want it to look like. And that's why you don't put any density numbers on it, because it doesn't matter what the density is. Like, we want this road to be lined with 3-story buildings, and we don't care what the 3 stories are consisted of.
A brick facade on a building with 3 stories, it doesn't matter if it's residential or all like commercial.
Right.
Like, we would just want it to look a certain way, and it can't be above 3 stories. There's a lot more creativity, I feel like, with form-based zoning.
And you get to plan and design your town with form-based zoning, because it's all about aesthetics, right? So what doesn't matter what the building is, as long as the building's in the correct spot. And that does sound silly when you just hear somebody say it out loud. Like, why do you care? Well, it's because it creates the whole entire vibe of like a district. It's a character, right? That's why these things are called character districts.
But I was just gonna say, like, there's so much, like, the opposite though is if you don't do form-based zoning. Sorry, I hit my mic. If you don't do form-based zoning, like what you're talking about, what you end up with, especially when you get caught up on numbers like density, is you end up with asking a BOC or a Board of Mayor and Aldermen to do more than what their expertise or their knowledge allows them to wisely do. Right. Because it's one thing to hire experts who then help you put together form-based zoning, and then also have people who, I trust a group of well-educated people to put together a plan for a town that says, this is what we'd like it to look like. That sounds great. But when you start asking those same people to decide what, in some ways, limit the marketplace, saying, no, you can't have this type of housing unit here, it must be this business, you're taking the decision making out of the hands of the developers who have a commercial incentive to make the right decision, and you put it in the hands of people who don't know what they're doing to limit things, and you end up with a town of 8 strip malls when everyone complains about not being able to turn left onto a street, and you end up with a pawn shop being approved across the street from City Hall after everyone got up in arms about the Kelvin temperatures of parking lot lights. You end up with this complete like non sequitur bunch of nonsense. You end up having months and months of discussions about density numbers that Mike is saying they don't even really matter according to the plan. Right. They're just guidelines for like helping people understand what they're looking at.
What the character's gonna feel like.
It's almost like getting like a a scientific paper that says, if you rub flint and steel together, you're going to get sparks and it might turn into a fire. That is what's going to happen if you do those things. And then everyone gets caught up saying, well, no, could you just tell us that it won't end up in a fire? Because we'd like to hear that. That'd be better for us. If you just told us it wouldn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the truth. It just changes what you're hearing people tell you.
I think you bring up a really good point too, which is that it does take the market almost out. But like sticking with land use or even trying to make our current the proposed zoning, the new zoning, feel more like land use. It takes the market out of the equation in a sense, because it's like form based. It allows the market to just freely operate. It's like if a developer comes in and thinks, oh, it's gonna make more sense to put some residential in here than just a commercial building, or it's gonna make way more sense for this to be all commercial. That's completely market driven. It's driven by what our economy's like, what the demand is, what that developer thinks he's going to get as a return. And you're right. I don't trust anybody who's an elected official who has no expertise in any of that. None of them are in in any field where they somehow have to deal with that on a daily basis. So it kind of seems weird to me that we give them that power to kind of think about those things rather than just trying to put in some system where it eliminates that power and just lets the market operate as an economy would. I also think you brought up another good point, which is if we look at what the zoning could be like, right, which is what it could turn into. Again, it's all theoretically based. So nobody knows, because we're dealing with an economy and we're dealing with a marketplace, and all of those powers are very real and exist. I mean, look at what's happened to the economy over the last year and a half. Look at what's happened to the housing market in the last year.
Right.
All of those things are going to end up driving how these developments actually take shape far more than the zoning will. So we can put in all this zoning in theory that says we just want a lot of commercial development. We don't really want apartments. I mean, that's great. That sounds like what Kate and Jessica want, and that on paper maybe that makes sense for certain parcels. But if you really think that a big box store is going to come in and build on something, good
just
luck.
Because you zoned
it that way. It's this kind of field of dreams vision for if you build it, they will come. It's that's not how it works. It's we should be trying to give ourselves as many options for how our land can get used, because there's only so much of it. Yeah. And yes, to Mike's point that he always makes, which is we're not bound by our boundaries right now, but until we decide to go annex more land and stuff like that, there is only so much land. And I think we should just be giving Nolensville as many chances for success as possible.
Correct. So there's this whole entire meta discussion that we can have about where Nolensville is with the zoning, because if you get this wrong, the zoning doesn't work. So if you hinder the entire zoning with a density limit that's not enough, meaning anything that's kind of not as a recommended guideline that we got, and I made this point in my public comment on Thursday. Just quick math, we spend over $1 million on the zoning rewrite, right? So we paid TPUDC $500,000 to write the whole thing, write the whole thing, poll the town, kind of get all the feedback. We spent $200,000 on the MTP that told us where the roads should go and how the roads should look like, and level of service of the roads. And then we have Victor Lay, town managers, over $100,000 a year, 2 planners in the planning department. All the printed material, just time wasted on meeting. We're over $1 million all in on just getting the zoning, and every single person that's worked on it in a professional manner with a degree and an expertise in that area is telling you this is a great plan, go for it, it makes sense, to the point where our planner is you can tell he's very giddy about the possibility of the TPUDC model finally coming to Nolensville. He keeps talking about how beautiful it will look, how he's excited about the potential of having this type of zoning here. But then we have 3 people well, 2.5. I'll give Haley credit because she does. It does seem like she's starting to understand that the voting base is not as important as getting it right, to a point. But so there's 2.5 people on the board that don't care. They don't care what the experts say. They're there with a personal or with an agenda that's centered around NIMBYs that don't want any sort of growth. So, if you get this wrong, if you get the density number to a point where it doesn't make it feasible, it just won't develop because the design standards that are baked into this zoning ordinance. They use the density as like an enticement to perform to those design standards, right? So like if you're driving down anywhere USA and you pop into a little town, and then like you get off the highway and there's a Dollar General and it's one of those metal buildings and you're like, that's garbage. It's like, yeah, it's garbage because that's what it's zoned for. They allow that. Like, we can't say you have to have these beautiful looking buildings and it has to look like it was built 200 years ago and it has this character and everything has to be upper scale and high end, and the sidewalks have to be brick paved and the Kelvin temperature has to be pleasing to the eye, and then say, but you can't make as much money as you want here. If you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to hit a point that Nolensville's been in for years and years, where the only people that are willing to give it a try are people that are willing to not work for top dollar.
Yeah.
Right. So like the meta conversation there is like, who's the biggest cell phone tech company in the world? It's like Apple, right?
Yeah.
Apple is the most profitable company in the history of like the corporate world in America.
Right.
It's like they're that good because they make so much money, and they wouldn't be making Apple would not be making the iPhone if it wasn't profitable, right? Somebody else like a name, like you can buy a fake iPhone from China,
sure,
and they don't make as much money because they don't charge as much. They're not as good of a phone, and they don't last. You get ripped off. Like Amazon's the biggest retailer in the world. They deliver within 24 hours to your house. They're usually on time, have the right stuff. It's not broken. If you like kind of the same argument, you can go and get it from eBay, but you don't have any guarantees.
Right.
So allowing somebody to make a ton of money is not a bad thing. It encourages competition to perform at a certain level. We just went through the freeze in December, and how many homes had bursted pipes? Like I live in Bank Creek. We have a Bank Creek community page, and I think the last count of people that actively posted on a comment thread that their pipes burst. So that means they have to be on Facebook, they have to see the post, and they have to be confident enough to post that their pipes burst. Was 28 people. Yeah. 28 homes had their pipes burst, and that's that is not a natural occurrence. Like, you shouldn't have to drip your faucet for your pipes not to burst. You shouldn't have to flush your toilet or like put a pin needle under your flapper to make sure your garage doesn't blow up because the temperature's dip. That's not a home maintenance item. That's not normal.
That's a flaw.
Not normal.
That's a flaw.
That's somebody built your house the wrong way, and they did so because they either weren't doing it long enough to know better, or they were cutting corners. And they wouldn't have to cut corners if they were if they knew they were going to make a lot of money regardless, and they wouldn't you would get a better quality builder if the possibility of making more money was around.
Basically what you're saying is it's people and companies, anybody is going to do the best they can if they see they can make more money from it.
Right.
But what we've done in this town is said you actually can't do that best version of whatever it is.
Right.
You can't do the best quality work. You can't optimize the type of business you want to run in this space because we've decided on our own that we want to allow it. And so the town is forcing less than stellar workmanship-ish across many different disciplines, whether it's construction work or it's the types of businesses that come in here and want to run their businesses, or what goods and products and services they provide, or whatever it is. we're artificially limiting them or filtering them out. As opposed to like, I all these people keep saying all these what if, like, well, what if you build what if you allow 24 units per acre and then someone comes in and does a high rise of apartments, which of course we know that can't happen, but let's just say it could. Like, does a high rise in the middle of a suburb outside of Nashville make any commercial sense to anybody? Probably not. So like, you don't have to, and I think maybe I've brought this up before at some point in the show, but like, people keep worrying about things that like, we're in America. Like, if someone can't make the top dollar amount of money they're legally allowed to make from it, they're probably not going to do it.
Right.
They're not going to just come in here and do something stupid because you allow them to.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, like the burst pipe thing, I think it's time maybe to revisit whether we're requiring
sprinkler systems
in homes.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other town. You know, if you started from scratch right now with the level of fire service we have here,
you wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do it.
Right.
I mean,
so like, why do we, I mean, those of us that have them, it's like, why do we have to keep them filled? Because why can't we just drain them and just decommission the system and say like, oh, well, great, we have it in the ceiling, but there's nothing, serves no purpose anymore.
Obviously, what I'm about to say is completely unverified, but I feel like your insurance carrier would have a problem with that.
Yeah, and I know, but like, I think the issue is like the insurance carrier would have a problem with it because of
if your house burned down.
Yes, but like for some reason, because Nolensville has set this precedent that you have to have it.
Yeah.
And so if we worked as a town to try to overcome that barrier for people, so like I'm saying this because the town put out this notice right after like all the pipes burst around the town, and we're saying like, you know, hey, like fill out this survey if your pipes burst, like we want to hear from you. And I'm sure it's like to try to just get a gauge of like how widespread was this, and like, you know, they're probably going to investigate to see like if there's anything from a official town standpoint that they can do. Or
they're trying to figure out if there's any liability on them.
Yeah, sure. But I think like the bigger question that they should be asking is just like how can we prevent this from happening in the future? So like one, we could get rid of the sprinkler ordinance. That's one way, so that any new build doesn't have to have this. But like two, is there a way to work officially as a town to make some proclamation or do something to appease the insurance companies to where they no longer require that as an insurance carrier for those of us that have the system?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, like, I saw plenty of people giving advice during the winter outbreak of like, just drain your system. Here's how you do it. Here's a step-by-step guide. You hook up a hose. Like, I mean, I saw pictures of people that have like a hose bib,
it's like jailbreaking your fire.
Yeah,
stick.
But it's like they've got a hose bib like threaded into their system, and they've got like a bucket, and they're just like, all you do is turn this valve, and then all the water comes out, and then you turn the valve back on when you want to. And it's like, okay, so you can obviously like take the water out of this system, which means it will never burst.
Right.
So,
but that also means one of your toilets in your home doesn't work.
Yeah, sure, because the water is off. But like, I'm sure it's a pretty permanent fix for a plumber to just be able to like reroute some water to that toilet without having to reroute it to your sprinkler system, and we could decommission all the systems.
Well, yeah, I will say like I've lived in 3 houses in Nolensville, and I've lived literally. I think I counted up before we got married as a child and through high school. I moved 12 times. I lived in a lot of houses.
Wow.
Not until we bought a house in Nolensville, in the 3 houses we've had in Nolensville, did we have a sprinkler system. Mm-hmm. Never once in any house I ever lived in did I stay up at night worried about whether or not a fire was going to happen. But since moving here, I've had many nights where I was really worried about the sprinkler system bursting. I've never felt any more secure because the sprinklers were here, but I've had many nights where I felt not so great. Over the last Christmas, holiday, all of our neighbors, both sides of our house and across the street, all had us going into their houses because they all left weeks before they knew the temperature was going to be bad, checking on all their houses, just to make sure that everything was okay. Yeah. And we got lucky because I think all of our houses were designed in a way that it keeps, we're enclosed crawl spaces or whatever. I don't know of anyone in our neighborhood that had an issue, but I think we kind of got lucky. I don't think that's necessarily.
Ben Creek got hit very hard.
But think about how crazy it is that like this thing that was installed in your house to prevent the hottest thing in the world, right? Right? Like fire. Yeah. Like this thing that was installed to prevent fire actually creates massive havoc during the coldest season of the year. Like that's just so crazy to me that and it's all because like nobody ever like thought, and I have said this other places, but it's like I don't know why anybody ever would think in Tennessee that it doesn't get cold, like freezing cold.
Yeah, I mean it happens once a year.
Like I don't understand why we don't have like tons of salt trucks and plows and like this. It's just like the city, the whole city of Nashville like shuts down when it snows, and it's just like it snows every year. Like get your head out of your ass and like look around you. It's freaking cold here too. Like it hasn't gotten warmer over the last, like for whatever people want to talk about global warming and stuff like that. Like it still gets cold every winter, and this happens every winter.
We have several times every winter where the roads get icy enough.
Yeah,
it needs to be dealt with.
Right.
It's again. I think I've seen you post somewhere because you're from Chicago, like where it happened, and you're like, no, it's nothing to do with like maybe drivers are worse here or not, but it's not really to do with that. It's the fact that no one does anything about the roads here.
Yeah, like we just act like, oh, like this is so crazy that this is happening. It's like, what's crazy? It's winter time. It's just a time of year.
And
like,
so in Chicago, obviously Chicago gets a ton of snow, ton of bad weather. Like if you're driving and it's icy, you slid out. Your car does the tail whip, you try to correct, and then you hit a gutter, and then you kind of self-correct, and you're like, oh, that was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Here, it's like you're driving, it's icy, you slip out, you try to correct, you go off this freaking ditch that's 15 feet below, and then your car's stuck
and
there
you might die.
Yeah, like it gets icy up north, but there's like we have gutters, we have straight roads, like there's lighting, right? There's like and then eventually they clear the road within like 24 hours. The truck can get you out. Like remember last year we had that snowstorm that lasted like a week.
Yeah.
So I lived in my old house in Ben Creek. We were like on a pretty significant hill. Like I had a buddy pick me up on the bottom of the hill in this truck so he can drive me and get diapers because I'm like I can't get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to live in Minnesota, and like I mean this never happened. So, but this is like what
snowed in Minnesota.
No, like this would be like the equivalent of it though. It's like it snowed a ton, and they dealt with it, and it was just a part of life. But then like summertime came around, and I never heard anyone be like, "Oh, it's really hot."
Right.
You know, it's just like I can't believe the sun is shining.
Yeah.
It's like yes, because it's like we have all four seasons. Like that's just how it is. But here, for some reason, it's like. We have all four seasons, but people just are like so ignorant that winter is like an actual season.
So in this last,
I can't believe that it's like snowing right now.
So in this last meeting,
why?
So in this last meeting, there was like a blurb from Kyle, our public works director. So last year they got snow equipment, snow plows, and everything, and then he gave the board an update. The funniest thing about that, it's like I was the one that was pushing the hardest for any sort of snow equipment. And not like big snow plows with like salt trucks, like the reason why I felt confident enough giving advice on that is I used to plow for a living. I had a landscape company and we switched to plowing in the winter. So like I know a thing or two about snow removal. So last year when I was stuck up on my hill for a week, I was just going off on the board and on town staff. I'm like, we need at least like a plow for a regular truck, just so we can clear some of this crap. And they finally got some, and everybody was talking about how like stupid it is to invest that type of money for like a once a year event. Well, so Kyle was given an update before they had any sort of equipment. Before they started buying their own salt, they were paying $1 per bag. They were paying $1 per. That wasn't per pound. It was like $1 per salt unit, whatever that unit of measure they used.
Yeah.
And they were paying they were paying $1 for that measuring unit. Since they have their own equipment and they have their own salt storage, they're paying 4 cents. So it's like obviously there's a smart investment. You're not like overpaying for you're not overpaying for emergency services from the private sector. You're able to take care of it yourself.
Right.
So like obviously that's a much better use of your tax funds. But yeah, but that's the funny part about the whole snow thing.
You know, and to kind of think about that in the similar terms, we have, for better or for worse, we have some like flood mitigation measures in place, you know, in places around town. There's retention ponds or other things that are trying to deal with that. You know, a flood causing rain might happen 2 or 3 times a year,
right.
But we invest all this like money and resource and infrastructure in dealing with that. The results I think are no less catastrophic for ice, because regardless of whether people should or should not be driving, there comes a time when like you can't just stay home for 3 days in all situations. The results can be just as catastrophic from an ice event. Whether that's elderly people who have medical emergencies and ambulances or whatever it is. There's lots of reasons why people still end up driving in those icy conditions, and so there's no reason why the genius is you'll say, oh, it only happens once a year. It's like, well, it's a lot of things only happen once a year. I mean, a fire in my house, knock on wood, happens 0 times a year, but I got to have sprinklers in my ceiling for them, you know?
Right. Yep. I mean, I just think I have this like saying that I kind of just follow in life, which is like, it only takes one time, right? It's like,
yeah.
And I don't follow that with everything because I don't like to live in like fear of like every single thing could possibly happen all the time. But it's like, it really does only take one time for something catastrophic to happen. And then it's like, yeah, that happened. Yeah. Right.
Well, the sprinkler thing is a little bit different because the sprinkler system thing, and listen, like the longer we do this, I'm sure that I'm going to piss off everyone at least once. Like I'm an equal opportunity obnoxionist. But so like whatever I'm going to say, I know that the fire department is not going to like. I do think that it's time to decommission the sprinkler ordinance, and a lot to do with that is like you proclaimed that you were blue at heart. Like I'm super libertarian. There's no difference to me between a sprinkler system ordinance and a seatbelt law. Like the seatbelt law doesn't save anybody's life but yours, and the government forcing you to have this life-saving measure. It's like I know the risks. Like it should be on me to determine if I want to mitigate those risks or if I don't. Like, and I wouldn't have that big of a problem with the sprinkler ordinance if it was inspected and built in the right way. Imagine a seatbelt law that there was always a chance that when you click in your seatbelt and the temperature is under 32 degrees, your car just blows up. It doesn't kill you, but your car just blows up, and you just need a new car.
And it's caused by the seatbelt.
Right, it was caused by the seatbelt, and then the government says, no, you still have to plug your seatbelt in, and we're not going after the manufacturer of the seatbelt. It's on you. Like that's a sprinkler. Like that is the Nolensville sprinkler system.
And I think so. Like you've said this like off mic before too, but like what? So some of those houses that are like going through the back end process now that their home has been destroyed, right? Like that's like a total rebuild, right?
Yeah.
Like
dude,
it's like totaling your car. It's like you don't get like a new a new bumper. You don't get like some new cabinets. It's like they like completely total the house and they're like we're gonna gut this down to the studs. You get a whole new kitchen. Your insurance is paying for that though.
Insurance is paying for that, so you do like right. So like your insurance will pick up the bill, but then you're dehomed for
sure.
Like a lot of times, like a year.
But the point I'm driving at is like, okay, so like I just think it's ironic. So we have these things in our houses because the insurance is saying like, well, you guys don't have a good enough fire department, right. And so like the town is like, well, let's put this ordinance in place so that everyone's insurance costs are lower, and they don't like actually put out fires. They just slow them down until the fire department can get there.
So the big function of the sprinkler system is to slow it down so you can get out of the house.
Correct.
You have more time to get out of the house, and it's also preventative in terms of like if your house catches on fire, they're gonna have to gut it. Your house is lost.
Yeah.
The sprinkler system will contain the fire to one house.
Yes.
So your neighbor's house is not burned down.
Yes.
Right?
So like there is that preventative side of it, but I just find it ironic that
and
it's
you
like
needed that when you had a volunteer because
right. But how many insurance companies do you think like give you an insurance policy oh, you've got sprinklers in your home. Well, that's going to drop X percentage off your insurance cost, but they never ever calculated for the fact that those that sprinkler system was never installed the right way.
It's like an insurance scam.
So I know, but like you think about it, and it's like what actually, if they were to run that through their like algorithms,
their actuary system,
what actually has more risk?
Right. I was getting there too.
Is there more risk of fire? Or is there more risk that those pipes are going to freeze? Because I would say like there's probably like an 85% chance that those pipes are going to freeze if you don't if a homeowner did nothing. And think about how many people just travel, turn their heat down, do all the things that you do when you leave the house.
Well, put it another way. During this last freeze we had, how many ever hundreds of homes had pipes burst? There weren't that many house fires.
Right.
Right. So Bank Creek, like I said earlier, Bank Creek minimum 28 households flooded. Yeah. Since Bank Creek was built, not a single home burned down.
Right.
And in one day, 28 homes flooded.
But see, like I'm convinced the only reason my house didn't flood was like not because I was flushing my toilet all the time. I just like turned my heat up to 80.
Jeez, man, you're like
I was just like I was just like cooking. Like my kids would be upstairs trying to go to bed, and they're like, "It's so hot in here," and it's like. Yeah, well, I don't want to wake up all night wondering if the pipe burst above your head.
Hot then wet.
Well, it's funny. We had in our previous
just
house,
like radiating out.
Our previous house in Ballinger, we had there was a deep freeze probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago. Because we've been in this house almost 3 years now. So yeah, it's been a while. But we did the same because of the fire system. We had faucets running, toilet running, whatever. We had a 3rd floor finished attic. That was up there, and we had a sink running up there, or a bathtub. We ran something up there too because it was like super far away.
It was like bathtub in the attic.
Yeah, we had a full bath up in the attic. It was something. I found a frog up there one time in the toilet. Don't know how that got up there on the 3rd floor. True story. But it was New Year's Eve. Woke up on New Year's Day to our bottom floor, our living room ceiling fan. Raining water out of the light fixture. Yeah. And long story short, that actually happened because that 3rd floor the sink had never been run that long and that constantly. There was a leak down in like our master closet on the 2nd floor that was there all along, but the water never ran long enough in that sink to really make it apparent. And so it wasn't actually a burst pipe. It was just we found out about it because the fear of a burst pipe was so real for us.
Right.
So we fixed that, but we actually found out a few days ago that house in Ballinger, they did have their pipes burst.
Wow.
In the spring, it was a sprinkler system that burst. So it's like even like when you think you've addressed an issue, I know it's not exact, but like who knows, because these things aren't built properly. Like what are you supposed to do? Like trace all of the sprinkler lines through your whole house,
right? And
make sure that all of it's insulated properly?
I actually called the builder. So, I called the builder that built my house. And so, I called him up. I'm like, hey, this is where I live. This is my lot number. This is the year you guys built it. Can you send me the plumbing blueprints? Because I want to know which toilet it is that's hooked up to my sprinkler system. And then she's like, well, obviously, it's just a random person that picks up the phone. She's like, I'm going to have our design team, whatever, call you back. He calls me back. He's like, yeah, we don't know. Like, we don't keep plans for that long. Like, you just have to figure it out. I'm like, how am I supposed to figure this out now?
Right.
Yeah. But obviously you go in, you shut it off, and then you figure out which toilet's not flushing. But I like you and me kind of texted about that because you just moved into Bank Creek too. So like you're new to it. You didn't know how the system worked in that particular house. And I did the same thing around the same time you did. And I was fortunate enough to where I was home, and I'm more of a like my personality is more of like, if I'm not going to alter my life to not have it happen, and if it's going to happen, I'd much rather just be home and be able to shut the whole system off
just
and
deal with it
when the last thing I want is like most times I travel during the holidays and like be out for a week, come back, and then there's a foot of water everywhere, and it's been that way for a week. So this time around, it's like I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not running my sink nonstop. I'm not flushing my toilets or putting a needle under my flapper. Like if it's gonna happen, it's going to happen. And just deal with it. Like it's a fault. If it happens, that means my house is built the wrong way. Let's find out now and then deal with it, fix it. Like obviously insurance pays for it, so you have that you have that ease. And I was all ready to go with that game plan, and then the rolling blackouts happened. And like, I lost power for like an hour and a half. I'm like, I wasn't nervous. Like I was like, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. Now without power, and the temp, like we had our thermostat set at like 70, and within an hour and a half, it went down to like 64. I'm like, oh crap, oh crap.
Yep.
Well, let's take a quick break, and then I've got one more thing I want to talk about on this episode before we wrap it up. Let's take a break. All right, we're back. We had a lot of organizational things we're working on for the next episode.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
But for now, Chris says he's got a hot pocket take.
Well, yeah. So
hot pocket alert.
And I think we can like segue out of this into like our next discussion, but yeah, I want to go back to talking about the density thing for just a second, because Mike brought up the point that he felt like Haley, since she's become mayor, has been more agreeable or just more mature. That's such a funny word to use for an adult, but I have kind of like an interesting take that we haven't really discussed on the show on this, and I can't help but bring up, that's part of why we exist, is to bring up the hard truths and to at least point them out, and people can make up their own minds about what's really going on. But I do think it's interesting that like as the zoning ordinance has gotten like closer to actually being voted on and becoming like a thing, that it's that Haley of all people is the one that's kind of like backing off a little bit on what she was saying a few months ago. So she was like staunch and like very, very against density for the longest time. But now that it's actually like time to put your money where your mouth is, I feel like she is absolutely putting her money where her mouth is. And I mean that in a very real sense, in the fact that most of the density parcels that are being voted on are literally in her backyard because they include her property.
But it's also so, dude, you're like, so.
And I just like, whether it's a conflict of interest or not, and whether it's being stated or not, is a whole, it's a whole nother matter. But I just feel like it has to be said by like here, because we love to point this stuff out, that our sitting mayor owns a piece of property that is also like in the area that is being fought over for density. Right. And she's not back, and she's now like almost flip-flopping on what her position was. Now she's saying like the density number needs to come down, but she's trying to like play the middle of like, well, it doesn't need to come down to like half, it needs to come down just a little bit. And so it's like, this is just like politics to a T, where it's like, well, this personally benefits me. Like, I'm going to make a ton of money by selling my land, because let's be honest, like, no, she's never going to continue to live here with Kroger being built in her backyard. Right. That's just not going to happen. So
dude, she referenced this conversation in the meeting. That like I barely holding it together now, because so obviously
she referenced the fact that she lives in the village.
No, she referenced you talking about this. Like like so
by name.
Almost.
Oh. Did she mention the cheap seats?
No. So there was a moment in the meeting where it was like she had to keep referencing that she lives in the triangle, and then Joel kind of like smirked at like after the 10th time she had to do it. Joel kind of like, I think Joel like made like a one-liner comment, and then she went, well, after you like, it's only so many times you can get called up for an ethics violation before you have to do it every 10 minutes. So it was, and it's like, obviously you're the one that's always bringing that ethics violation on. I think that like, so Haley tends to always make the right decision, but in a very long, hard road. And I think that, so like in this meeting, to give you perspective, there wasn't a single person that spoke that was against density, that was against the zoning. Every single person that spoke, and there wasn't a lot of them, it was probably like a handful of them, me including me. But it was all her neighbors. It was Frank Wilson. Frank Wilson has that corner lot on Clovercroft and Nolensville. He's the first alderman of Nolensville.
Right.
He is like 4 doors down from Haley. He owns massive amounts of land there. He's over 90. If
Right.
he's not, like, I'm sorry in advance. I do respect Frank a lot. But he was standing up there at the podium. He's struggling to like get his thoughts together because he's like a little bit older.
Sure.
He doesn't want to come off as disrespecting, but he's there. You can tell that he's only there because he's legitimately fighting for his property rights. And then you have Mark Blankenship that was there. Mark Levine is sending in comments. So like all her neighbors do want that because they won't live behind a Kroger. They do want out of that area. Because of what Nolensville has become, it's no longer like they can't drive their tractor.
Right.
They can't like bush hog their side, their right of way. Like it's just too congested. They can't live their life like they used to. So they know they want to get out, and they do want those property rights to where they can maximize. Like in Frank's case, it's 200 years of really hard labor. It's
Right.
farming on rock.
Right.
Like he's farmed that piece of land, or his family has, for 2 centuries, and it's middle Tennessee, like you mentioned. It's sloped, it's rock, like you can't grow crops, and
Yep.
like Nolensville. The reason why Nolensville doesn't have this cute little downtown like Franklin does, because Nolensville didn't have any money. There was no money here.
Right.
And then finally, it's time to like cash out because of the growth. So they can't live here any longer because they can't live their lives the way they're used to, and they are asking for those rights that allow them to cash out all that hard work that they put in.
Yeah.
Especially for like Frank has literally started Nolensville.
Yeah.
It was Napper, Frank, and Duggar that started the town.
Right.
So I think that's why you see a lot of concessions from Haley, and that's why I said she's like sounds more mature, because it's finally landing home after a year of experts telling her or recommending to her what the right answers are. Her not having full trust in the experts, and now you're at a point where she is the face of the BOC. She is the person that's going to take all the blame for every time somebody's stuck in traffic. She is the person that's going to get all the blame for all the pipes bursting. But she's finally starting to realize the position she's in, and all her neighbors on top of that are calling her, telling her like, we actually do want this. Like we do want this because you've already approved the Kroger. We want to get out of here. We can't live with a Kroger on our pasture fields. Like we want out, and this is the way to do it.
So I just have to ask you, because you know the market like really, really well. How much does our mayor stand to make if she sells her land?
I actually don't know how big her parcel is.
Let's guess.
CD5 probably, if CD5 goes through, you're probably looking at like $250,000 an acre. I mean, obviously depending on where the sewer is, depending on slopes, there's a lot of dependencies there. But if CD5 goes through, I mean, you're looking at significant amount of money. It's significant. That's generational wealth.
Like 7-figure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, by the way, like right before we started recording this, you were like I was like, I have one more thing I wanted to bring up, and you're like, well, what is it? Well, like I wrote down what I was trying to bring up. You can just read what I wrote down there. It says Haley compromise. That's actually my note for what I wanted to talk about. So it actually is not far off.
Yep, it's a great segue.
Which is she, for better or for I'm trying to think through what I'm going to say to think if I'm being hypocritical or contradicting myself in any way, and I honestly don't care. This is how I feel, which is like I really don't care how long it took her or what her motivation is. If she comes around to doing the right thing, then like I don't care like what really the motivation is.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like a good idea is a good idea. I don't care who says it. I don't care who. I wish that people who oppose some of the things that we agree with would adopt the same idea, which is instead of being I don't like you, so therefore anything you say is wrong. But I don't care what her motivation is if she's willing to compromise. But the point me making this note is just she is the only one so far who's been all anti-density that's even like had a suggestion that's something other than what she originally said.
My only issue, and this is kind of just like poking the bear a little bit here, like for months she was so anti-density that she wouldn't vote on a development that's already underway, South Walk.
Yeah.
Like she wouldn't like help that along with density at all. And she was just like, and it's up the road and it's not in the village and it's not even close. Like it's separated from the downtown. And she just wouldn't help it. She was so staunchly against it. And I just think it's ironic now, months later, and when it's land that she owns and will stand to benefit from. I'm sorry, like I'm going to say it to the camera, like Haley, like you can't separate that context as much as you want to. As much as she may not be, maybe it's about her neighbors. Maybe it's about caring for, you know, history and those that have come before you and wanting those people to benefit because like she already approved the Kroger and so she feels bad and like this is like a way to pay it back to them. I don't care what her reasons are. She still owns her parcel of land and she stands to make a load of money. And if she votes in favor of this, I'm always going to say that you did it to personally gain because it doesn't matter how many political spins she can throw on it. That's what it is for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
But I don't disagree with you, Daniel, that like at the end of the day, does it really matter? No, because as long as we get the village,
two things could be true though. Doing the right thing could be financially beneficial to you. Like I mean, the two things could be true at the same time. I do feel like,
but she didn't do I agree with that, Mike. But like she didn't do the right thing for the right reasons everywhere. So she didn't apply that same kind of logic in all the places that she could have.
Right.
Well, I mean, but she can't. I mean, again, though, well, I think a better like test of it will be the next decision that she makes based on not being her land, because people can change their minds. You know, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt when they do something that I like. I mean, I mean, that's for better or for worse. I like the decision. I like the direction she went this time, so that I'm like, oh, let's just give her the benefit of the doubt. Again, because I agree with it. The next decision, you know, after this, will be more telling, because if she goes back to being anti-density all the time, that would be more telling versus being a little more conciliatory or more willing to compromise. I think the thing that, you know, versus, you know, again, in the past she did what she did.
Right.
Maybe she changed her mind. We don't know. But, you know, to hear, you know, so far Kate and Jessica have been unwilling, like we talked about earlier in this episode.
Yeah.
Unwilling to do anything other than like their magic number that they have written down somewhere, whether they came up with it or somebody else told them that's what it is. There's no real good rationalization for it. It's just a number that they want, and if it's not that, I don't want it. But they're the ones who are going to shout about everyone having to compromise. And another louder voice, someone on the planning commission, Terry Adams, goes on about how much of an expert he is at compromising or negotiations, when anything I've heard from like the side of the NIMBYs against growth has been, give us exactly what we want every single time, or don't talk to us. By the way, I'm an expert in negotiation. And it's like, that sounds nothing like a negotiation. That sounds like what you do if you're taking hostages.
Right. Right.
Which, like, they're not, because they're not in control yet. But, like, where is the negotiation on the other side?
Yeah.
I keep hearing people that are trying to drive a vision that I think generally we support, saying, okay, fine, we wanted 24, we'll make it 20, that's fine. We'll bring these other density numbers down that, again, we've already talked about in this episode, don't even matter anyway. But like we'll move from like what we think is right a little bit to meet in the middle. And the other side, who has experts in negotiation, won't budge on anything. Yeah. Anything, for anybody, anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when Terry or anyone from that side says negotiation, like they're really using the wrong word. Like what they're talking about is bargaining. Yeah. Right? Which is like,
or not even that, compliance.
Well, but I mean, it's like, no, but like, okay, so like when you're bargaining with someone, which whatever, some people call that price negotiation, but it's really not. It's like, because like you're not bargaining, to me, it's like your strongest power in bargaining is your ability to walk away, right? So it's just like, I don't have to buy this thing. I want to, but if I'm not going to get it at the price I want, then I'm not going to buy it.
Right.
That's a totally different thing than negotiating. Negotiating is like, we are going to do this. Yeah. Both parties are going to go forward.
You already made the decision to move forward.
Like we're doing this. So because we've both decided we're doing this, here's my terms, here's your terms. Now let's figure out a way to meet in the middle so that we can get this done.
Yeah, we want something to work.
Correct.
And so let's meet at that common goal of getting something to work versus what you're saying again.
Yeah.
The other version of it is I actually don't care if this works or not.
Yeah, so therefore my vote's no.
Right.
But it's also that cliche,
Regardless of what you offer me.
Yeah.
It's also that cliche that's been way overused, where the good compromise is where both parties walk away, not getting exactly what they. So I always looked at that saying, that cliche, as like, that's stupid because there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer, and you can't have a half of a right answer. But like going through this meeting, watching this meeting unfold, Haley was very uncomfortable with 18. She was willing to come up to 18. She even said that she's going to catch flack for 18, but she's willing to go up to 18. Derek and Joel are both saying we want 24. We should do 20. Haley obviously wanted less than 18. They meet at 18, and both of them walk away out of that meeting. I can guarantee you, both of them went home and said to themselves, at least, it's not what I want, but I think we can make this work.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, there was the first time in my life where I saw a negotiation where it was this is the first time that I can apply that both parties walked away mutually equally unhappy about that deal, and the deal feels like it should work.
Right.
There isn't a big difference between 18 and 20, 18 and 24. You take 12, what is what Kate and Jessica wanted, and you take 24, middle point is 18.
Right.
I still me personally, I would still want to kind of fire test that idea of is 18 curbing it too much in terms of what it would do to singular parcels, but that's technical, and you can kind of address that on a case by case basis.
Right.
But just walking away from that meeting was I'm not thrilled about it, but this is way better than not making a deal.
Right.
And if you walk away glad that you at least made a deal, I feel like that's a good enough deal.
I feel like we get where things sit right now. Just again, not having watched the meeting, but based on what you've described and how these votes went, it's the NIMBY side of the vote is basically just hey, unless you give us, to Daniel's point, it's like a terrorist negotiation. It's unless you give us everything we want, we're never going to vote for this, which doesn't feel a whole lot like you really care about what is best for Nolensville, right? It's we're not entering into these negotiations saying okay, we have a common goal that we need new zoning for Nolensville to be successful.
Yeah.
It doesn't really feel like you agree with that statement.
Right.
If you're voting no on key parts of the new zoning and just saying well, unless this zoning mirrors what the old zoning was, which is essentially what they're doing. It's unless the density looks exactly the same as what it used to be for the last 20 years that got us in this mess, we're not going to vote for it. It's okay, well then I guess we don't agree on the very premise that we need to move forward as a town. That we need a deal at all. And so it's that's a really interesting predicament, given that we, as much as the old board disagreed, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would much rather have the old board than the new board, not BOMA.
Okay.
I would much rather have the old BOC than the new BOC, because the new BOC, it's I feel we have people involved that are just mirror images of BOMA members.
Yeah.
And they just want to take us back 20 years instead of recognizing that the town wants to move forward.
Yeah.
The people want us to move forward, and there's a way to get there, and you either stand in the way of it or you don't.
Well, for me, speaking of the old BOC with Wendy Cookmucci and Lisa Garamoni on it, there was always this there was always a level of mutual kind of respect. I know that I've had sit down meetings with Wendy before, and I know that she never necessarily agreed with me, but she would rather me care than not care. I'm at least, if I assumed wrong, then whatever. That's at least what she used to tell me, and kind of it was kind of mutual. I'd rather she care than not care at all. This board, specifically with Kate and Jessica, and I have absolutely zero qualms about saying this. I fully believe that they sold themselves out to win the election. Like if you go after the police chief, if you let your side do what they did, you're selling yourself out to get that seat. And once you sell yourself out to that agenda, your hands are tied to that agenda. You cannot go back on it. Like how can they, like if they got into office based on this agenda of saying no density roads, like we need roads, not density, how can they ever vote for density, any sort of density? Like that's what got them elected. Like they sold themselves to that point, and those people got them elected. They can't go back on their people, especially because their people use tactics that are almost inhumane.
Right.
And if they go back on those people, that those people like historically have turned against people that turned on them, right? Like,
well, I mean,
you should start a ticker on the Insider, which you kind of have this a little bit of like tracking like how many road projects have been started, but like
zero.
I was about to say that. I was like, I was thinking about the next episode. I was like, I wanted to intro the next episode the date is so and so.
Yeah.
The current number of roads that have been built in Nolensville since the last election.
I know you made a post about it, but like we should start like a ticker that like is just like counting in
like
real
every
time.
Resident moves in, just
but it's like how many BOC meetings do Kate and Jessica go through before they actually propose a road?
Yeah.
Like what? Like
they're 0 for 2 right now.
I know, but I mean, to your point, Mike, it's like how can like if these are the things you ran on, like all they're doing right now is being like a stick in the mud and saying like, well, we're gonna like raise our hands and vote this stuff down, and we're gonna play hard to get and.
They're going to do that for at least 2 more years.
I know.
Another election.
4 more years.
I mean, I'm saying, well, they'll be doing it for 2 years until we see who.
But the reality is, and what we all know that like most of the public doesn't know is that like they can't propose a road project because there's no money.
Oh yeah.
Like
no money. I mean, yeah.
Well,
we'll get. I want to get more into the money part in the next one.
Yeah.
And do we tease the next one?
We can do that. I'm just writing down all the times that Chris cussed in this episode, so I can bleep them out.
I counted 3.
Yeah. Well, I let. Hey,
I asked if we were G-rated today.
Yeah, I let the PG.
I told you it's Sunday, so
yeah. You can tease the next one. Tease it.
Every glass I drink, I
me.
just get
so
more
the next
R-rated.
episode, like we are getting the first guest ever. This person should be on their way. It's a he. Called all 3 of us mid episode trying to get
On.
Yeah, called in.
We don't have that technology yet. We can't.
Yeah, we can't dial him in. But he's on his way. He should be here any minute, and we're going to discuss just the fundamental like basics of government funding and where the money comes from, how the funding works, just the process of how government gets its money, how it spends its money, and how long that process takes.
Yeah, let's say, for example, you wanted to build roads, not density. What would it take to build roads, not density?
Miracle.
So that'll come up in the next episode. But for now, thank you all for either listening or watching Small Town Charm. We'll be back again very soon. See you guys. Bye.